Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today we have Michael Niehoff, owners of Learner Empowered. I am Dylan Potts with Agile Education Marketing, and I will be moderating this session today. Today's session will also be getting recorded, so if you must leave early for any reason, don't worry, there will be a link sent out. Everyone will be on mute besides Michael and I, so if you have any questions, please ask them in the chat, and Michael will address them throughout the session. Michael will cover developing your messaging and questions like, what is the role of school in today's environment? How to address what students are really craving, and how to take advantage of the ever more blurred lines between home and school and even home and work. With that being said, Michael, I'd love to hand it over to you so you can talk about what schools could be and what they should be.
All right, good morning, and thank you, Dylan. I appreciate it. Really excited to be here. I always love agile marketing and all the different topics and audiences we get. So we're going to jump right in with what school could be, what school should be, and that's a pretty big quest, pretty big challenge. We're going to try to take it on. So again, my name is Michael Niehoff, longtime educator. Started off in a media field as a writer, journalist, public relations, kind of advertising person. Then got invited to be a teacher in high school many years ago, and really enjoyed working with young people, and was very fortunate early on to have some experiences that I think really informed all the things that I've done since. So I was lucky to teach at a school that gave us some freedom and that challenged us to get students to do relevant real world work and to share that work, and it was sort of inherent in some of the things we did. And since then went on to become a high school principal and worked at a community college. And but more importantly, I've just continued to try to learn myself and stay abreast of all the things that are happening in the world and try to bring those to anything that we call school or learning. My big passions are project-based learning, but I've done a lot of work in career technical education, and really big believer in students and student voice, that if we empower them and support them, that one of those folks that believe that young people are amazing and can do amazing things. My biggest pet peeve is when people of any age put young people down and don't realize that they are amazing and that they will continue to kind of surprise us, by the way. And I think the last year and a half has demonstrated that really well. So here we go. We're going to jump right in. I think Dylan's going to drop the copy of the slides in the chat as well. But you guys can have it is a tiny URL copy of Agile slides. There are some resources and some links and some other things in the slides that you may want to have access to. So certainly feel free to, you can even follow along during the presentation, or at least you have a copy for afterwards. And like Dylan said, comfortable with questions throughout and questions at the end too. So we're going to jump right in.
Michael, you're not sharing your slides just yet. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. Dylan will be sharing the slides though. So are we good to move on?
Oh, we just can't see your screen where you were sharing the slides.
Oh, are we not seeing the slides at all?
No, sir. It's sharing the GoToWebinar screen.
Okay. It just says that I've just paused it, so it says it's showing main screen. So something changed between the last. Not seeing slides at all?
No, not currently. I just shared the slides for the link to the audience.
It says that I'm showing the main screen. I wonder if it's, oh, here we go. Just like another, now we're gonna have it, aren't we?
There you go. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for letting me know. Just like Zoom, we've got the option of the split screen. So, okay, so we're in. Okay, so again, we are gonna go after the what school could be, what school should be. My name is Michael. Certainly if you feel like reaching out to me afterwards, especially about one of the projects I share, or one of the resources I share, or one of the concepts I share, I think a lot of it is going to be something that you can explore on your own and pursue further. But certainly don't be afraid to email me or text me or call me or connect in any capacity. I really appreciate that. So you guys have a copy of the slides in the chat, and we're going to roll. So what's the why for this? What's the why to even ask that question, what school could be, what school should be? And hopefully to some degree, the last year and a half has really demonstrated that that's a legit question, but I think it's always been a legit question. But we're going to go after it a little more aggressively, I think, even than we have before. So And I really want to ask the question, are we looking at a collision or a tipping point? And I want us to think about that, because there's a lot of things happening in the world that have been happening for a long time, whether it's globalization, technology, all sorts of things, economic changes, and then if you add in, cultural, political changes, it seems almost unlikely that schools shouldn't be changing all the time, and maybe now transforming in some way, right? But I don't know if we will. I've for a long time been a believer that we are, and I love that people are enthusiastic about that change, and I've tried to embrace that change myself. But it's amazing how powerful the system is, and how powerful we slip back into either traditional modes of school or even our expectations. And that's kind of what I want to get to, is that really everything needs to change, not just teaching, for example, or that how learning is happening. We kind of need to change our whole view of school and what school is and how we evaluate success, all of those things. So I don't know the answer to this question, and probably on a given day I go back and forth all the time. But one thing for sure, we are still in the middle of a transition, a huge shift in the world that's a fairly, in terms of history, a fairly recent shift. This idea that we're going from this knowledge information kind of age to kind of more going to something like an application. What are we doing with knowledge information? There was a time when knowledge information had to be sort of sought or dispensed, but the reality, as you know, the internet has changed that, and the speed of things now is so accelerated, and probably the smartphone was that last big tipping point, right? Having access to information, or even, matter of fact, we have more information than we know what to do with, right? So it's not a matter, it's a matter of choosing the better or higher quality information, but more importantly, in terms of school or students, what are we doing with that information? And that seems like almost an automatic, but surprisingly, if you walk into a lot of classrooms today, even in 2021, we are still focusing on giving people information and knowledge. A little bit what I'm doing today, unfortunately, right? Not going to be a lot of application, but that's what we're after. Okay. Post-pandemic education transformation. People have been asking this question since March of 2020. And sometimes they're not asking it. Sometimes they're telling us, hey, school will never be the same again. And I think we will never be the same again for lots of reasons, but I'm not sure school is going to change so automatically. I think we've been shown some things and seen some things, and I think the tipping point is a little closer. But again, the system is powerful, and we do fall back on tradition in a lot of different ways. So I don't know if the pandemic is going to be the tipping point. A lot of people that I talk to and work with, they wanted it to, me included, and they think it's happening. They think the global pressures, the technology, and the fact that students and parents and educators have seen more than ever what's possible. We can't go back to what we were doing, several years ago, or maybe even a year and a half ago. But I'm not so sure that's the case. I would like to be hopeful that it is, and I think in many ways it will happen. But it's always going to be slower to some degree than we think it is. As much as the world's change is accelerated, education's change never quite accelerates at the same rate. So again, I don't know the answer. I'm hoping, but so we've heard a lot about learning loss. And the first time I heard learning loss, I kind of cringed, because what I don't like about that is we assume that, one, that students weren't learning this last year and a half, and I would argue they've learned a lot. And I am not an elementary teacher. I'm a high school teacher by trade. However, I do know that there are some foundational skills and literacy and numeracy type things that are important. And if young children don't get those foundational skills, certainly that's where school becomes more of a challenge. So my hats off are to the first, second, and third grade teachers and kindergarten teachers for keeping that alive. And maybe there was some learning loss, but I also think we got to be really careful to think that there wasn't a lot of learning happening in this last year and a half, and maybe new kinds of learning that might be more powerful. For example, kids helping other kids with technology, kids showing their parents how to use the technology. So a lot of our kids became teachers, and that's pretty powerful. That means they're actually learning at a very high level. And that doesn't count some of the things they may have engaged in technology-wise or even challenge-wise. And as tough as this last year and a half was social emotionally on all of us, especially our kids, that also is learning, right? That's learning how to adapt, learning how to adjust. That's that grit we talk about. So I think we got to be really careful to say that learning loss is automatically happening. And by the way, maybe we had a lot of learning gains. The problem is if we assess that only based on one thing as a standardized test, we're probably going to be convinced there's learning loss. But my final statement about that is I don't want to think that we can't think that school done one way is going to be the make or break anything, right? It's giving ourselves a little too much credit that, and we got to give our kids and their experiences a lot more credit. Okay, so when the shine comes off the apple, the big reveal, what parents saw in the last year and a half was a lot of the good, bad, and the ugly. And even if it was ugly, that doesn't mean it couldn't be also good in some ways, right? We saw all the foils of technology, all the challenges. We saw people struggling with time, with schedules, kids essentially doing a lot of work independently, not having the support and supervision, et cetera, that they normally are accustomed to. But as frustrating as that probably was for teachers and students and families and others, again, there might have been some good things happening there. Maybe it was time for us to reveal some of these things, that we don't know as much about technology as we maybe should. We haven't figured out different ways to do things as much as we should. So again, as painful as the pandemic was in school, it may have been exactly what we needed, right? To show us that, one, we got to make some changes and we have a long way to go. And when it comes to learning, we need to look at that possibly differently. So I think our parents and our kids might be engaged at the highest level about learning in school than they've ever had before. And that's a good thing. And that's going to be something that has an impact, right? So a lot of this comes down to how do we define learning? And that is, to me, ultimately the big question. And if we continue to define learning either by knowledge and information, or we continue to define learning by how much time somebody spends sitting in a classroom, or if we define learning by a certain score on a standardized test, we're probably missing the boat about what learning really is. That learning is much more dynamic, much more unique, much more active, and we know that inherently, but I think this is really something we have to start asking ourselves is, how do we define learning? And that'll lead us to the question of what schools could be or should be. The other thing is, how do we, in this defining learning, how do we set up our schools? How do we organize them and how we fund them? There's been something called independent study in most states for a long, long time. And independent study is like anything else in education. It can be really phenomenal, and it can also be not so. you see the gamut, right? And that's no different than anything else that we see in terms of school. However, there's one key thing that independent study has always had that I think maybe we can look to really embrace now, and that is they've always not based attendance on how much time someone is at school, but rather how much work they complete. So they award credits or grades or et cetera by work completed. And as we think about that, isn't that really more what the real world is like? It's not about always, how many hours we do something, but rather how much have we accomplished? How efficient are we? And that forces us to be able to adapt and adjust and become more efficient. So I'm wondering, I know in California where I'm based, California is making this very difficult right now. Maybe there's gonna be some new life to, they're actually really limiting the number of, and especially charter schools, being able to be independent study. But I think we have to revisit this idea that we can't base or define learning or school on time, but rather on something else. And work completed, what students produce, seems to be a lot more valuable. So as a high school person, I think we really need to evaluate, like, do my high school students need to be in school Monday through Friday, 8 to 3, to accomplish what we need to accomplish? And the pandemic showed us that, by the way, we don't need to be in class Monday through Friday, 8 to 3. We saw lots of schools and lots of teachers, lots of educators, and with the help of lots of students and families, working out very different schedules, right? One is we didn't want people to be necessarily online all day, right? Doing a Zoom classroom from 8 to 3. So that forced us to do some different things. Hey, can we do some instruction and then set students loose to do some, to do some work, to perform, to, address the challenge or the needs. So going forward, this is something we really, really got to look at, and I think if we continue to define education based on seat time or classroom time or schedule, then I think we're missing the opportunity to redefine learning and redefine what school is. Okay, so the bottom line is, I think our communities, our stakeholders, our parents and our students and our grandparents and our siblings and our neighbors are maybe more aware of what's happening in education than ever before. And that's a good thing. We need that to happen. And I think the pandemic forced that to happen. We saw things that we had never paid attention to before, right? A lot of parents took things for granted. Hey, I send my student to school. If I don't hear much from the school, I'm going to assume that everything is okay, whether it was or not. And I think what parents, for example, saw was it's a lot more complex than that, right? There's a lot of challenges and frustrations, not just because of technology or not just because of the pandemic, but learning is changes all the time, right? And it's influenced by lots of different things. So I think we have an opportunity now, because people are more engaged, to get them involved in this discussion of what school could be and what school should be. We have a unique opportunity, and that's if we think school could be and should be something different or better. And of course, I'm going to advocate that it should be. The world is going to tell us that it needs to go that direction. But so again, we have an opportunity here. People are engaged, they are aware, and that's going to force a lot of things to happen. You're going to see more and more families. By the way, every school district in America, if they didn't have an online school before March 2020, they now have a permanent online school. In other words, some students in every school district in America have opted to stay online forever. So the schools have had to, if they didn't have an online school, they had to create one. If they had one, they noticed the enrollment in that online school going up. So more and more people are embracing this idea, and it's not because online school is perfect, but it's because they see the advantages of something that's different, and they see the advantages of the flexibility and the adaptability. All of the problems that we have in learning, or all the challenges, are still there online. But what they're embracing is that time part, right? Not judging things on time, and being more creative with how we structure things. And people are looking for that. Students are looking for that. Parents are looking for that. The world is actually looking for that. So here's what they're looking for. People, the pandemic, if they didn't know this already, the pandemic showed them that we need to be more flexible. We need to be more personalized. We have to give people options and choices. There's got to be more than one way for every student to get to where they're going. And I think, again, good teachers have always done that, and good schools have always tried to do that as much as possible. But the system likes things to be very uniform, right? And that's that comfort level. And the more uniform it is, the less ability we have to offer people those personalized, individualized experiences that they are now looking for more than ever, and they know are possible now. They've seen it, right? It can be done. Then the last thing is, I think they're looking for something that's more meaningful. They want an experience. They want to have something that changes their life, something that improves their life, something that engages them, right? Parents want that, educators want that, students want that. So we're kind of coming together that these things are now starting to really coalesce, right? So the world is saying knowing is not enough. What the world wants to know is what you can do. And I think a lot of us have always embraced that. A lot of us, once we got to our careers, realized, hey, it doesn't matter if I was a C student or an A student. It matters what I do now, how I perform, right? It doesn't matter what my test score was. It matters what I can do on the job. So we've known this inherently, but now the pressure for school to be more like us is more than ever. And a lot of that's because the skills have changed. The world has evolved a lot. And people say, well, the world has always gone through changes, and that's true. But the technology thing has really made this a rapid acceleration. Our economies are in a huge transition right now, and that's scary for a lot of us, because that's going to put us in situations that we're not accustomed to. And you're seeing the pandemic just push that over the edge. But the reality is this: the world of work is looking for people who can really collaborate and work in teams really well. And those could be virtual teams like we're seeing, or face-to-face, or probably a hybrid of those, right? They want people to have those communication and those interpersonal relationship skills more than anything. Yes, we have to be able to read and write and do math, and have some understanding of things, but it's really more about how we interact with one another, and what we are able to produce together is what the world of work is asking for us. And that's not going to happen automatically. That's something we have to teach people how to do, and they have to have lots of practice and experiences. That you're going to see the skills become these new terms, right? You're going to hear things like new media literacy, right? So we're redefining what literacy looks like. Literacy is not just reading or reading and writing. It is everything from social media to technology, to data science and information science. But you're going to see things like design mindset, transdisciplinary, this idea that we work across disciplines, that the world is not broken up into chunks, but the world operates fluidly in all these different ways. And school needs to mirror that more, right? Not be, and if you think about the American high school system, and really secondary education across the world traditionally, is we break education up into chunks. I go to chemistry, I go to English, I go to math. that is something that's probably not sustainable, because that's not the way the world really works, right? It's not that those subjects don't have individual value, but the way we use those subjects in the real world is much more interdisciplinary. But anyway, you guys get the concept there. But here's the part that's really changing. Not just the world of work, but the universities and higher education, which for a long time has dictated, especially what high school does and even what K-12 does, is starting to change the game. So the SAT and the ACT are assessments that were admission exams for higher education are really on their last leg. What the colleges and universities are realizing, because they are listening to the world of work, are saying, we need to evaluate people on what they do. And the best way to do that is through a portfolio type thing, portfolio assessment. So asking students to be able to demonstrate, articulate, explain, defend, redesign what they do. Being able to take what they know and take action with it is what the universities are moving towards. And as that happens, K-12 needs to respond. And K-12 is ahead of that in some ways, because our standards have been going that way, and much of our education with technology has been going that way. But now, even the colleges, which become this, gatekeeper, right, for so many of these things. One is a lot of people are opting out of college for a variety of reasons, and that's another issue. But secondly, they're acknowledging that the way we assess people going to college is, one, not equitable, not accurate, and not complete. Okay, so the world is really demanding this portfolio thing. We have the technology, we want people doing real work, and then we want people to be able to showcase their work, explain their work, share their work, right? So if we haven't had digital portfolios before in our schools, we really need to get serious about them now, okay? The portfolio used to be reserved for certain careers or certain pastimes or passions like art and architecture. Now the portfolio is really going to be the universal thing about how we assess what people know, student work, right? And it's a lifelong thing. Obviously your portfolio is going to evolve with you as you learn and grow and advance. So the impact of tech, what students can do. This is some stuff real quickly. If you look at the right, and again, you have links to these. These are some things that were produced during the pandemic. So not so much the video on the left. We've been able to do video for really high quality digital video for a while now. But what you're seeing is with the smartphone and other technology we have, making high quality videos has really become really accessible and user friendly to almost everybody. And student films and student videos are a great way to demonstrate learning, right, and to communicate. But I wanted to share a couple others. The student who's featured in the upper right-hand corner, that was a year project he did this year as a sophomore in high school. And we won't have a lot of time to go into him, but what he did was he happens to go to a school that has a sophomore culminating kind of capstone project, and they have lots of choice on what they do. So his choice was to essentially start his own company, which was a kind of music production company, and use Instagram to see if he could grow his audience and essentially monetize it and grow his company. And he did, and he's made. I talked to him probably at the end of May, and he had made $500 since he launched his Instagram account. And the reality is he's doing a lot of things in one thing there. He is learning about entrepreneurism. He's learning about personal branding. He's learning how to maximize or utilize technology professionally. He's following certainly personal interests and strengths and passions. It's just absolutely phenomenal. But this is the type of thing our students can do and should be doing, right? And so bravo to any schools that create these sort of experiences for kids. This could have been an English project potentially, could have been a project in a technology or media class. This happened to be something that he kind of did as part of his English class, but for kind of a school-wide capstone experience. The one that says the student podcast, and again, you guys all have access to all these, we won't take time. That was 8th graders earlier this year in the fall, tackling the idea of broken laws. So the idea when we get into these political seasons, like we had a fall election, teachers are always looking for one, how can we address what's going on politically in the world without dividing everybody or being offensive. The reality is this is a great example of, hey, one of the things we do in elections, or especially when we elect new officials, is laws change, right? Because things evolve. And so students got to examine and pick a law that they think is broken or needs to be updated and changed, did their research, and then produced a podcast about it. So these are authentic real world things that students are doing. They're addressing real world problems or challenges, right? They're using real professional technology, and then that work is being shared with the world. So that you can call that project-based learning or call it what you want, but it's certainly the authentic thing that the world is demanding and that our students can do. So when you get a chance, if we do have time, maybe we'll take a look at those a little bit. So, okay, so I wanted to share this with, since somebody had already written a book about what school could be. You guys may be familiar with Ted Dintersmith and Most Likely to Succeed. He actually has a whole website, so not just the book. So this is some really practical stuff. As a matter of fact, if I go ahead and just take you to his website, you're going to see real quickly just that he has put together all these resources working with educators about what school could be. So he's got some real practical things. Obviously, he's got the book. There's events that happen. There's a whole community. But again, it's empowering schools to prepare children for life, for the real world. And it's got all kinds of great resources. So, but really, just one good example of what's possible. And we're sorry about that. So the book and his work has really tried to coalesce some of these things. So what our students need to be doing, what our schools need to be doing is mobilizing our communities, right? We need to be working with our communities, collaborating with them. Again, this is where project-based learning, service learning, and collaboration and work-based learning, all these things come together. That we have, most of our communities have some partners, whether it be business partners, nonprofit partners, community leaders and so on, that themselves are working on how to improve their communities or address problems. We're just saying that the students need to connect to that. The school needs to join in on those missions or those challenges. And that becomes that student-driven learning, right? Where we can connect students to things that they're interested in, that are real, that matter, and they're gonna work with real people who have real problems and real needs, and we're gonna use real tools and real technology and real resources. Sounds a little redundant, but it's a big deal. And so that's that real world challenge. The authentic assessment is going to be things like we just saw. We're going to be making student films and videos, students making podcasts, students making their own social media, using social media platforms and hashtags. But it can be anything. It can be infographics. It can be presentations. The list of those kind of products is endless, but they're authentic. They're real. It's what the rest of the world uses as tools and resources to move work forward. And we got to embrace those. And they're really trying to get to this caring and connected community, this idea that if one of the things our world needs is that ability to have empathy and to solve problems, right? And you're seeing everybody kind of dance around those kind of things. So I do recommend this book. I'm currently rereading it right now and reading this with a group of folks. But it's challenging us to really rethink the whole thing, right? Not just how we teach and learn, but how do we structure our schools and what's the ultimate purpose of our schools, right? And it's got to be honest, it has to be beyond college and career, okay? Yes, college and career is a byproduct of that, and it's certainly one of the goals, but we have to think even larger than that, right? We have to set our students up for being successful in any environment, and environments that we don't even know what they look like yet, right? And yes, that'll often include college, and certainly some sort of career, but those things are changing so radically that we can't look at that in a singular form. It's got to be something universal that students are having these transformational experiences, right? Okay. So we're really at this idea of personalized, customized, or you're going to hear things like personalized learning. This has been around for a while, but now we're asking the question: how can school meet the needs of every student? And that is not only their needs, but also their interests, their strengths, their schedule, their family situation, and again, that can be scary for us. But the challenge is there is a way to do this, and we just saw examples of it. And the going something that's more project-based, authentic, real world, something deeper with some choice. That is a way to get this personalized learning. And so it can be done, and this can be done in kindergarten on up. Okay, this is not something just reserved for high school and college. Students can have these experiences at an early age, and it pushes them forward to the next level. So we won't have time, but I wanted to share, there are a lot of model schools out there, and these have been written about for a long time. Getting Smart is a great organization that has a pretty active blog and podcast, but one of the things they do is they try to put together lists pretty annually of schools that would be worth visiting, whether that's in person or virtually. But what I wanted to share this with this is I think these schools used to be the anomaly, and now they're starting to become much more the norm, right? We used to have just a few of these, and now we're seeing hundreds, if not thousands of these around the world. Schools that are personalized, right? Schools that do embrace some of the things that we've been talking about. Schools that really are challenging to not only their students, but also themselves to be something completely different. So I encourage you to look at some of those. This is one that was also recently in Getting Smart, and we're going to talk about this sustainable development goal thing in a minute. But those are links too. So if you see that, those are live links where schools are really trying to do this community connection thing, right? Again, project-based, deeper learning, has a service component. They're utilizing technology. They're partnering with people, nonprofits, businesses, and then they're tackling issues and community problems. And let's face it, all of our community problems are global problems, right? So we can start globally and work local or vice versa. But there's some great examples in there of schools that are doing these really transformational things. And they're, again, starting to become more the norm and less the exception, right? I do want to mention this school because this is where I think things are going. Okay, now this happens to be a private school, and it's a fairly new school. It's only probably a little over a year old. It's called World Over International School. It's an American based school in that regard. All virtual, all online. This was conceived of before the pandemic, and it is private. And so for some of us that might be, well, that seems like that's inaccessible to us or irrelevant. But the reality is two things. Can we learn from other schools that are doing innovative things? And I think we can. And two, maybe school is going to be a combination of private and public, or some hybrid. And maybe they're going to make things so affordable and so accessible and so customizable that a lot of people can be engaged in it. So what these guys are doing is, again, all virtual, all online. Students can come from anywhere. It's a big focus on middle school age students, but they go beyond that. But they're starting to really be creative. What they're doing is they realize that there are parents and families and students out there that want a unique experience, and maybe there's a way for them to have it without leaving their public school. So if maybe they go here part-time. Maybe they take a summer course. And what these guys are doing is setting up courses and experience that students and families can opt into. You can be a full-time student here and never go to your public school or to another charter school. Or what's probably going to be more common is you're going to have students attending a public school or public charter school, or maybe a private school, and they're going to be using this as their supplement. So, and what they're doing is really, really interesting. They're really investing in the virtual reality. And what they're doing is they are designing a whole virtual school. So not just the courses and things are online, they are actually so invested in the virtual reality that they're creating a virtual school that when students use the VR, they're going to be able to have these field trips and experiences. Literally, it's going to be a physical virtual school. It has a theater with performances in it. It's going to have, they're going to travel around the world virtually and go on these field trips. So they're using virtual reality and trying to bridge that to an instructional educational experience. But I think the big thing is not about the specific things they're doing in terms of even VR or project-based or dual language immersion, but more that they're making things very personal, and students are having these great experiences, and they're making that accessible and becoming more and more accessible all the time. So there's an article there that I recently wrote about them and what they're doing, and how they are trying to reach out to different communities and families and connect them. And the kids and teachers are having these great experiences, and the more those become known, the more and more families are going to want to have those similar experiences. Personally, I think a lot of things they're doing could be done by any school if the school just says, hey, we want to try this, we're committed to this. This is something we can all do, whether it's virtual reality or dual immersion or project-based. It's more about, can we create experiences and allow people to have some choices of how they opt into them, okay? So again, are we looking at a collision or a tipping point? I'm not sure. But I think we're seeing in all those examples, if you get a chance to look, that these different kinds of schools are becoming much more the norm and not the exception. They're still the minority, okay? So our traditional public school, which has also changed a lot and is probably doing a lot more things with technology and doing some things that are more closely related to project-based or deeper learning, or career technical education, or those kinds of things. But the reality is we're going to see more and more of these individualized, personalized approaches to school, whether they're independent study, whether they're virtual and online, whether they're private, public, charter. And as those start happening, we have to see how the system responds, right? Are we going to create more and more model schools like this? Are we going to allow every student in every school district and every school in America to have this kind of experience? The more people that start having it, the more the pressure is going to build. Hey, why can't my student do that, right? As parents start talking to their neighbors and their neighbors say, this is the type of experience my student's having, and then the other parent says, oh, that's very different than, and that's what starts driving change, right? Because people want to have quality experiences that are relevant to their own individual situation and individual kids. So as the parents become more aware and engaged, which we've said we wanted for a long time, and the kids become more savvy, aware, and engaged, look out, right? I think it's a good thing, but it's gonna challenge all of us, because this is gonna push us to create these new schools or new types of experiences, right? Here's what they're saying, what students are craving, okay? And I think we've kind of known this for a long time. Some of this is not new, right? But I think we're hearing it louder than ever before, and the world is on board with it, right? We want that relevance and application. We want things that we're doing that are real and authentic, that affect things. They definitely want choices, options, and flexibility. It can't be one way all the time, right? It doesn't mean that students understand that there are, we have to work within certain restrictions at times. They understand that there's laws. They understand that there's they understand there's not unlimited finances. Okay, students are not naive to that, right? They also trust us for the most part. But they also know that other people have had choices. Why can't they? And they just saw during the pandemic that we were flexible and that we gave people sometimes different options on how to do things. And then what I think more than ever, what our kids are thinking and feeling, but not always articulating the way that we want them to, is they want to be connected to something that's important. They want to be part of something that's significant and has an impact, right? It changes things, it improves things. I think this is great. I think we should capitalize on that through service learning and project-based learning and career technical education. They want to do things that matter to them and that they see have value, and others see that it has value. And that is very much a psychological experience that kids are really craving, and in many cases articulating in a variety of ways. One of the common ways kids articulate this is when they check out of school, right? So when high school kids are disengaged, we need to look at that and say, why? Why are they dropping out? Why don't they want to go to school? And by the way, during the pandemic, we saw a lot of secondary students just not even showing up, right? Because more and more they want this and they're not getting it. And we can argue about that. We can debate about that. Personally, I agree, but how we do it, lots of different ways. But if we don't acknowledge this and realize this is happening, then we're in trouble. Okay, so that's why project-based learning or something that's similar to that gets us to that, where people have those experiences, right? They become, they take ownership of their learning, and they're doing things that matter and that are significant and that other people notice are significant, okay? So you're gonna hear all these things that we hear in education. I think these are all correlate really well. I like project-based learning. I recently had a couple educators tell me, oh, we want to do problem-based learning. And I said, I think it's essentially the same thing, right? They're all inquiry-based. They're all about addressing real-world issues and challenges. All of them are about capitalizing or utilizing student strengths. Some of them involve places we need to go, whether that's face-to-face or virtually. But the reality is the world is looking for this and moving this way. What we call, I'm not so sure is the important thing, but it's a matter of do we do it or not, right? The ironic thing is that the schools and students that are doing these types of things that we're seeing, the more deeper project-based oriented work, the funny thing is they're actually scoring better on standardized tests. And yet we use standardized tests as the reason not to do this stuff all the time. We don't have time to do the really interesting, powerful, cool stuff because we have to worry about the test score. Well, the reality is if we did the really powerful, cool stuff, our students would actually probably do better on the test, right? The other thing is they actually do better, not just on the test, but in terms of completion and going to college and getting involved in careers. So because they get exposed to certain things and have certain experiences and become more empowered, they actually perform better in college and beyond. And so again, a lot of the things that we say we can't do that because our requirements are this, we're missing the opportunity, okay? I want to share this really fast. This is from the United Nations called the Sustainable Development Goals. You'll hear them referred to as the SDGs. This came out in 2015. The United Nations set a 15-year series of global goals that they wanted the world to address. And there's actually they say 17. The 17th goal is actually to take action on the 16th goals. But these are things about poverty, equality, economics, all the things that you probably know, the climate, our planet, healthy food, access to things, right? Infrastructure, you name it, they're probably what you hear in the news. Well, these are these global goals, and that what they're doing now is connecting this to schools. So when people talk about, well, where would I start? This would be a great place to start. If your students or our schools are engaging in these issues, they are joining forces with the entire world, blessed by the United Nations, to tackle some of our biggest issues. And I think students will identify with that, and there's resources and data and things that are available for them. So just want to mention that. And so, Dylan, don't be afraid too if some questions we're having. The World Over School, how is this funded? Again, yeah, it's tuition based, it's a private school. But what they're doing is, because they're offering summer courses and part-time and those kind of things, they're trying to make that more affordable. You don't have to be a full-time student, which it's full-time tuition. Private school can be very expensive, right? So, and I'm sure they're exploring different ways to get things funded too, whether that's partnering with certain organizations or sponsors or businesses or corporations. And the question is, the private sector advising on some of these programs and model schools, how are they involved? Yes, I mean, you've heard about everything from like the Gates Foundation and those kind of folks. A lot of these schools are partnered with, certainly have that corporate or sort of business endorsement, but a lot of them are also probably working with a lot of nonprofit organizations. So that comes back to addressing these real world issues, and then you have partners that are working on the same problems. This is the idea of the Sustainable Development Goals, kind of pushes us in that direction. So I hope that answers that question. I don't think we really have time to watch the videos, but you guys can watch them and find out what the Sustainable Development Goals are. If you didn't see there, that I mentioned a few of them: good health and well-being. Think about social justice, those kind of things, right? Decent work, economic growth, the sustainability, responsible consumption. So, and these are things that our kids are interested in, not necessarily all of them, all of the time, and all kids, but I can usually find something to connect kids to in some regard. And most projects we do and most work in school that relates to this would touch more than one of the development goals, okay? So, I encourage you to watch them. They're really short videos explaining what the Sustainable Development Goals are. If you want to watch this video at some point, this has all the celebrities in it saying why this matters and why this is important. But we're not going to watch it in the interest of time. So, but this is kind of stuff we're looking at. So I pulled out a couple more examples. These are things that are happening in the world that I was lucky enough to recently discover in the last year and be able to write about. But this is the not just that world over school, but this is where things are going. Can we partner with? I love the question about how are we, how are these things funded or who's involved in this? So here's a good example: Global Brigades. We're seeing a lot of these nonprofit organizations that connect to school and education. What these guys do is they actually work with high school students to address several different issues in third world countries. A lot of those related to economics and healthcare and medicine and those kind of things. They actually will partner with high schools, and then the high schools. So, and even they did this virtually in the last year and a half. Where in the past it used to be, we raised money or we would even travel to these places. Now it was much more about them just becoming aware and raising awareness and campaigning for and advocating for. But these are those things that are out there. So I would encourage you to visit this Global Brigades. These are working with high schools right now in our country, and look at some of the statistics they have. Okay, right, that money they've raised. The partner different communities, local communities they've worked with in different countries around the world. It's 6 different countries, and then the number of volunteers. So, and this is where our students can get lots of experiences, right? Not just the service learning and service aspect, but again, addressing those real world problems, partnering with people, collaborating with people, producing professional level work that contributes to something larger. So the other one I want to mention, this is very similar. This is more geared towards the college student, but again, the experience that people are after is the same, right? Can I have an impact on my community and beyond? This is called Global Citizen Year, and what they do, and they also adjusted for the pandemic. So they used to send college students to all these different countries around the world, and what they had to do in the last year and a half is nobody could travel, right? So they had to do something different. What they created was these You can, at some point, they will still be doing that as the travel restrictions hopefully become better everywhere, and where we are in the pandemic situation. But what they created was they realized, hey, there's a virtual aspect to this too, where we can connect, in this case, college students, to people around the world that are working on problems, and give them these experiences. And these collaborations, that are really going to put their career to the next level. They're going to be networking with really interesting, important people, solving a world. So this is where, what do kids put in these portfolios, right? Well, we can't just put, my best essay in the portfolio, or even my best slideshow in the portfolio. It's got to be, well, who am I working with, and what kind of impact does it have? And these are great things to be, not just for the resume and portfolio, but these are the kind of things that inform people's lives and change their lives. So I encourage you guys to check these out. I put another one in here. This is one I came across this year, and it kind of ties in with all this global work that's happening, whether it's the SDGs or global brigades or the global, all these different things are related and are going after similar things, right? So now you're seeing not just the world coming together, but these organizations filling the gaps, right? Some of these things involve some funding, some of these things don't, but you're going to see schools, whether it's high school, middle school, even elementary, start partnering and join these networks in some way. It might cost the school some money, it might not. This is one that's really interesting, is that because all the students are doing this kind of work, this organization, which I believe is a for-profit company, said, hey, how do we capture all this, right? We have to, so what they are working on is really a new kind of transcript. They want to have a transcript that shows this kind of work. So not just your grades, right? Or not just your scores, but a service learning transcript, right? It's almost like a project-based learning or real world transcript. And that's what they're doing. And of course, they're connecting it to scholarships, and they're trying to make that bridge, right? Because this is what colleges are looking for again. What's in your portfolio? What have you done? We all know for a long time in college, it was also what kind of internships you have, what service learning you're doing is going to get you that job, right? Well, this is that concept, that students need a way to capture this. This organization is really interesting. They'll work with your school directly. So a student or a school can create their own project, their own service learning work, local or beyond, and then this platform gives them a place to capture all that, to document it and turn that into a transcript. Or they will also connect schools and students with existing projects that are going on. So it's both create your own and use our platform to help you document, or partner. We're gonna connect you to a network of these things going on. So. Anyway, good stuff. So this is some service learning resources I wanted to put out there. Some of these are not brand new. But again, these are free resources that give schools and educators and students opportunities to partner with larger organizations and larger purposes, right? And again, connects to that global stuff. And we used to look at service learning as just that add-on. Well, I think now if you look at service learning, this really becomes really embedded in project-based learning and in career technical education and all these things that we're talking about, and the personalization and the choice. So we're going to see service learning become much more part of all learning, because really service learning meets a lot of those needs, right? Students are doing real work. They are contributing to larger causes and to their communities. So it meets all those things that what school could be, what school should be. But we know there's a lot of value in addition to the service stuff, is getting kids connected to their work-based learning and work experience as early as possible, right? So want to include some of those. And the reality, these are similar in nature, in the sense that we're trying to provide avenues and resources for students to have more transformational experiences, right? That will launch their careers or give them the skills and experiences to launch whatever career that they are pursuing or will pursue, right? So this is things, we are summer now, right? And these are things that we've always had, things like summer internships, but what's changed now is the resources, right? And there's literally dozens of these websites where schools or individual students and their families can try to connect to summer experiences. And so the world over has summer, we want to do virtual reality in the summer and pay a little bit of money, or maybe it's more about earning some money and getting a real world experience. But the reality is these things become part of that portfolio, part of that resume, and become part of that real world work. So the more that our schools can connect to this and embrace this and include this as part of the program, matter of fact, I'm just going to say this, if I was a high school student, this is what summer school should be. And we just had a lot of students not do well this last year academically, quote unquote, right? And we have more students in summer school this summer than ever before. And I'm going to go back to that question. I'm not so sure that that's going to be learning loss or learning gain, right? If we don't put, especially our secondary students, but really anyone that struggled in school for any reason, maybe it's about giving them a different experience to get them engaged, and versus just giving them more of the same, right? And I think we've been traditionally very good at giving people more of the same. And I think we need to flip that and say, maybe what they need is something very different, very unique, personalized, that will hopefully change their trajectory, right? And then whatever else we include becomes more relevant or hopefully more successful. So I want to, we don't have a lot of time here, but I just want to fly through. The challenge with this is I think it's not just about having different models of school and doing more project-based work and more service-based work and all these things. It's really about the culture, right? If we can't do these things if we don't change kind of how school functions and the mindset of school. Tony Wagner has been saying this for a long time. He's a longtime Harvard guy, internationally known, has written books about innovation and education. And he'll tell you that the problem with school is school. Our schools are set up not to be innovative. They actually not only don't encourage it, they often discourage it, right? It's not what we do, right? Traditionally, we are good at uniformity, those kind of things, right? Not necessarily being creative and innovative. Now, do I know in every school in America we have creative teachers? You bet we do, right? And they are driving this, right? And we have creative principals and we have creative superintendents. So they're out there, but the reality is the system is not inherently innovative by nature. We have to change not only the system, but how we look at all this stuff, right? So we need to look at creating that culture. One is this stuff is not taught in school. Even to our teachers that are becoming teachers right now, they're not having these conversations, right? They're still talking about the same old thing. How do I manage a classroom? How do I check out my textbook, whatever, right? They're not having these discussions about what is my role as an educator? Is it about transforming students' lives and giving them these types of experiences? Teachers know this, but it's not being taught to them. They know it matters, but we haven't come up with ways to make this the dominant thing that we're even providing our new teachers, right? So there's all kinds of opportunities to make culture and change the way we do school, how we start school, how we end school, what we do throughout the school year. I used to work at a school that we started the whole first week of school very different. And these are the kind of things that we told our students that we were going to do. So we tried to make promises to them that we were going to be different, we were going to be better, we were going to listen to them, we were going to use technology, we were going to do real world work. And so it's making these public commitments. We started a thing called Smart Start Your School, but the reality is how we start school matters, right? Do we get kids really excited early on using technology, connected to real world problems, partnering with people, show them what's possible, or do we just jump right into our normal academic plan and not address these kinds of things, right? And then we have all kinds of opportunities to keep these things alive, right? There's a great thing out there called lame duck days, where if you have a day before a vacation, there's typically poor attendance and poor academic participation, is do something different, right? Maybe this is a way to launch some of these things, these community-oriented, project-based. We have opportunities to start these things, and these are some good opportunities. Looking at how the real world does this, how do they get people excited about their work and doing real world work? So these are real quick things. It's just as personalized learning, obviously, teacher-student feedback and collaboration, and then this enrichment or cross-curricular and something more project-based. So real couple quick things. This idea of student ownership has been around a while. This is what ownership really looks like. This increased problem-solving skills, certainly addressing things that are real world and connect to college and career, and really about giving students voice and putting them in roles and situations, right? So this is not something we haven't heard about, but now I think the pressure and the desire is higher than ever, right? Is putting students in situations where they can assume lots of leadership, have impact, and have an individual role on all the things that they're doing. So think about the roles and responsibilities. We've had titles before. These are things that one school did. It does work, right? We need to give people these opportunities. I worked at a school where we had a student project coordinator. Instead of a teacher's aide, we said to students, if you're really good at something and have an interest in them, can you actually be a co-teacher or co-facilitator with a classroom teacher and help students on projects, right? So if I have video skills, for example, or technology skills, can I become a project coordinator, elevating the student to a different role, right? So we can do this with projects, give students choice on how they tackle a problem or how they demonstrate their learning. And so there's a lot of people doing project menus, again, providing choice. Again, hopefully the projects are meaningful real world projects, But people are doing this, right? And the choice is really powerful psychologically. This is how we personalize things, right? And even how we run our schools, our students on our hiring panels. At my high school, we were really fortunate that we had students on every interview panel. And so there's lots of ways to do this. Can students be involved in how you run the school, right? And there's all kinds of things out there, but if we put students in charge also in their school, that speaks volumes about how they can take a bigger role in their community, right? So it's how we give feedback to people. How do I reach my teacher, right? If we're not okay with students texting us these days, that's really a struggle. We got to figure out a way to do that, right? And we can do that through Google Voice or some other format, right? The culture of no. Do we say no instead of yes, right? Do we, if people have a good idea, do we listen and try to make it happen? How do they connect with us again? Do we look at our students as customers and our parents and our stakeholders as customers? They have ideas. Do we ask them? Parents and students are used to taking surveys, but it needs to become more about the learning, right? And more about what they want school to be, right? The more we listen to them, the more we can do the school should be, could be, right? And there's great things out. These are questions we can ask our students about their learning. So these are sample questions from a real high school for real students. So evaluate if they say they aren't learning, right? And if they say they aren't engaged, they aren't engaged. We got to be able to listen to that, right? Again, so now we're looking for projects and experiences, creating experiential situations. Again, tapping into student interest areas. How can we connect their interests with things that are going on in the world? The goal is to, I think, in the end, is can we make every student famous and put them in a role in a situation where they have impact? And it's not about famous for fame's sake, but it's about elevating them to a role where they do get recognized for doing high quality work that's contributing to the community and the world in some way. And if we do that, we're well on our way. So my goal is I want every student to be a Greta, right? I really do. It doesn't matter what issue they're passionate about, but I got to take their passion and have them connected to doing real world things, right? I want every student to be Nandi Bushnell, who I have featured before, who was an internet sensation as a musician, and she's like a 13-year-old girl who's collaborating with Dave Grohl of the Foo Fighters, right? I want every student to have that opportunity or create environments where they could do that. The last one, we don't have time to watch that. Last one, this is a young lady now who has graduated from college, but I want every student to be designers, where every student has a portfolio that looks like this. When this young lady was at USC, she already had a professional portfolio with all of her projects and all of her work, and so there's no surprising that she now went on to a career in sports media. But it's because she started early, right? She had these early experiences in high school and college that really set her up, and then she had the portfolio to demonstrate that, right? So that's it. I think we're pretty much almost out of time. We might have time for a couple quick questions. I appreciate your time today, and hopefully you have a chance to go look through. We didn't have the time to look on a lot of those resources or those organizations or some of those different things, but please do. I think you'll find that some of those are not only inspiring, but give you some practical things that a lot of us can do if we're willing to give it a shot. Dylan, what do you think?
All right. Thank you so much, Michael. It was great having you.
You want me to stop the showing the screen?
All right. Thank you guys so much for attending, and you'll have a great day.